Hopper, I believe, last year, and she said, "Look, guys, this is what I do. I train people on how to work with, how to apply, how to respond to crisis, how to work with people, and how to give first aid for people that are having mental health crisis." And so I know that Tara works for Centerpoint. She's a mental health professional. She's worked in that people with substance abuse issues for over 20 years. She's an advocate, and I can tell you she is. I'm sitting at church and my phone dings, and here's Tara on a Sunday morning trying to advocate for somebody who's on the streets. She's constantly looking for people. Not when she's at work, she's just constantly advocating for people in her life. So she is definitely advocating, and she believes in a holistic approach. So I think that's probably why we work so well together, because we believe in a systematic approach towards people. We know it's more than just a Band-Aid. There's a healing process that has to take place. So sometimes that's a journey, and we're willing to invest in people through that whole journey. She works for Centerpoint Human Services. It's a managed care organization for Rockingham, Stokes, Davie, and Forsyth County. Anybody here heard of Centerpoint? Good. If you guys ever go down 220, there's a big billboard out there, isn't there, on 220? So if you get on 220 tonight, as soon as you get on 220 headed south, look up on the left, there's a billboard for Centerpoint Health. They have a lot of services and do a lot of really good things and do a lot of teaching in our community as well. So she has two kids, Skylar and Savannah. Skylar's 18, Savannah's 13. She volunteers at the Madison Rockingham Rescue Squad and the Madison Man and Rec Department. So she's somehow in her spare time, she's finding ways to still volunteer and give back to her community, because she understands, I'm quite sure, what benefits you can receive from volunteering. And any of you guys that have attended our class that we teach on volunteerism would understand there's so many benefits to being a volunteer, and so much joy that comes out of being along for that ride, and quite frankly, just being available for people and advocating for them. So I know she's not done eating. No, I can keep talking, but I don't think they want me to talk. Yes.
Can I ask you how you got started into this?
While
she's eating.
Sure, I think that's a fair question. My entire life worked in a business world. Even when I was failing in one business, I was looking at another business, and most of the time it was retail. I moved to North Carolina in 1994 and opened a chain of retail stores, which we had for about 15 years, and mildly successful. And then decided I was done with retail. I was swearing it off. I'd never do retail again. Here we are doing retail again. So God has a sense of humor. But I went back to school, got an IT degree, and began managing a group of IT people. I started feeling a tug and a push about 10 years ago. I started feeling that I started noticing people in crisis. I started noticing families, especially, that were struggling, and my family was one of them. When I retrained and went back to school, we spent 2 years in and out of food pantries, and there was times when I didn't know whether we'd keep the house, whether we'd lose the house, whether I'd keep my family, and so we really struggled. And people that I knew supported me through that and shared hope with me and really cared for us through that situation. So I had some really good experiences, so I went back to work in the IT world. I was doing really well. I was managing a team of 23 in 4 states, and really enjoying life, and it was the worst job I've ever had. Best paying job, but it was the worst job I've ever had, because I was being tugged and pushed towards something else. And God really, 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 really dealt with me on some of my control and pride issues. And one day I had got a phone call from a pastor who I knew, and he was trying to find help for a family of 4 who was on the streets, and there was nowhere to put them, and it was 30 degrees that night, and our only choice was to take them to Greensboro and drop them off at Urban Ministries. And they don't have family sheltering, so it was split the family up on Lee Street. And quite frankly, my heart was broken. my heart is still broken today for families in Rockingham County.
So you've actually been at the bottom and you know what everybody else is relating.
Yeah, I think that I have a story. I don't always share that. I think what I like to share is the fact that I know there's hope.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, I know what it's like to have been there. I know what it's like to have been broken and addicted, and I know what it's like to be healed and experience healing.
but I think that makes a lot of difference to a lot of people. I mean, not that you would share your most important feelings, but
Right.
your compassion that you know.
Oh yeah, I mean that's why I do what I do. I agree, and I would be, you know, at any point in time I could I'll share my testimony. That is not a problem. I don't get it. You guys don't ever want to take the 2 hours it takes me to talk through that. But you know, I have before. I had a chance to go down Team Challenge last year and share that with them, and spend a couple hours with those guys down there sharing my testimony. It was impactful for them. So that's kind of my story, and I'm still sticking to it. All right, she's ready. So this is Tara Tucker, guys. Just give her a quick hand. Thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you, Tara.
Do I get to be the teacher's pet?
You gonna have a tough job, because I never stay in one place.
Gotta talk louder, honey.
I said he's gonna have a tough job, I don't stay in one place too good.
I'm used to chasing my pastor.
Did everybody get one?
I can mic her real quick. You guys can get this. Sound will come from behind us, but I can do that if you guys need to. Guys, can you hear her all right?
Yes, yes, I can now.
I can talk loud.
That's good. We have everything we needed. Yeah.
Y'all tell me if I need to talk louder.
I will. That's good.
Use your teacher voice.
Yeah. We got a bunch of unruly kids here, we got here.
All right, so, like Marty said, I really do have a passion for this field. He just talked about how God has a sense of humor. I always laugh. I did volunteer work all through high school in probably every area you could have volunteered except for mental health, because I was never working in that field. Was not working with those people. I had a cousin that my aunt raised, and he had addiction issues, and so I watched how hard it was on her and that lifestyle. I mean, he was in and out of jail. She would have to lock his clothes in the car. He wouldn't go sell them. He stole her lawnmower, rode it to the crack house. So I just watched that, and he lived they lived down in Gastonia, so they were a couple hours away, and just seeing the effects of it from here made me think I'm never working in that field. And I tell people, I really think what made me not want to work with people that had mental health or substance abuse issues was because I didn't have the skills. I didn't know what it took. I'm also a paramedic, and I see this with other paramedics, with law enforcement officers. It's a population people don't like to work with because they are unfamiliar. In our paramedic class, we had, maybe 4 or 6 hours of behavioral health training, and that was it. So I am passionate about teaching people how to work with folks with mental health and substance abuse issues. One thing that we teach in mental health first aid class is 1 in 5 people have a mental health issue. 1 in 5. I mean, that's 20% of the population. That's a lot. So I tell people, count 5 people in a row and you figure out which one of you out of those 5.
I'll take the blame.
And really, if you ask every family, somebody in the family or somebody they know has been affected by substance abuse issues too. As a paramedic, I see people have medical issues, but they also have mental health and substance abuse issues as well. You can't treat one thing without treating the other. And then you compound that with the social issues they have, whether it's financial issues, housing issues, whatever. So that's why I'm so passionate about treating the whole person. Because you really, it's I work at a wellness center and we focus on the 8 dimensions of wellness. You know, so looking at occupational, if people don't have jobs, how are they gonna be well, like fully well? Spiritual issues, that goes in there. Economic issues, just look at the environment some people live in. I spent 10 years working in Guilford County, out basically in the streets of Guilford County. I went into people's houses, and it was people that had chronic mental health and substance abuse issues. So a lot of them had bipolar, schizophrenia, major depression, and they all had some major needs. You know, and you can meet one of those needs, and let me tell you, they would be your friend for life. Because you look at just basic needs, we talk about Maslow's hierarchy in the mental health world, food, clothing, and housing. And people that don't have food, clothing, or housing, I mean, they're going to do what it takes to get those. If that means going to the hospital to get those needs met, if it means going to the jail, I mean, you know, I think people are so quick to judge, especially in the faith community. And I went to a Christian school my entire life, so I grew up with a very strong faith background. And I know, you know, that sometimes people can be very judgmental. And I think having that message that we're there to do the outreach, we're there to help people is so different. And I truly, you know, I've seen it from the ground up with people. And Marty said, you know, I mean, people do call me when folks are in need. And I said, I think it's like that. There's this big billboard that says, just call Tara. Because, one of those calls when I was headed to church, and a pastor called me. He was getting ready to go preach a sermon, and he said, you need to go help this lady out. Well, I couldn't say no. So, it's a lot of needs, and it's amazing how many of those needs are in our communities. I think some of you are from Forsyth County too, is that right? Yeah, so our main office is over in Winston. That's where I've been all day. And the same needs are there too. You know, people need housing. Fortunately, in Forsyth County, there's more resources than we have here in Rockingham. So we have to get creative at times with things and really working with people. So what kind of things do you think about when you think about mental health? What are some of those? There's a big stigma with mental health, right? And we all acknowledge that. So what are some of the things? What are some of the words you just associate with mental health? Nuts. Crazy. Yeah, I mean, these are the realities. What else? Psycho. Yeah. Schizoid. What about dangerous? People think of that they're dangerous. Why do you think of people with mental health issues as being dangerous?
You don't know how to react.
They don't know how to act, they're unstable. What about the media? What does the media portray? Every shooting that they have, somebody has a mental illness. Is that not right? Especially these mass shootings, they have mental illness. And I will tell you, this is from research and studies. They are more likely to be the victim of a crime than actually be the perpetrator of a crime. So they actually are more vulnerable than people think. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've never had a client do anything to me. Being one-on-one in their house with them, I mean, nobody's ever hit me. They've never attacked me in any kind of way. I have found that they actually are protective. I mean, when I worked with people over in High Point and Greensboro that had substance abuse issues, they would tell me where to park my car so that somebody wouldn't think I was an undercover cop. I mean, they would do things that were protective of you because they know that you're there trying to help them. So hopefully you'll walk away knowing that a lot of these stigmas really are not true about people with mental health issues. And the same thing about substance abuse issues. You know, the faith community can be very judgmental when it comes to substance use issues. And I know that was my background. My background was you don't drink, you don't do anything, and these people that did were just like not good people, right? And you don't need to be around them, that kind of stuff. But addiction is a tough thing to understand. It really is tough. I had a guy in there this week, and medically, he can't function through the day without drinking something. He's like, I know I need help, and I know this is affecting my family, and I know I need to keep my job, so what do you do? And it's really a hard thing. And then he's on probation, so guess what? He has to meet all these different appointments, but you got to keep your job too, in addition to all these things. And he has no transportation because he got 2 DUIs. But when you really look at his issues, his brother was murdered, and he drug some people out of a really horrific car accident. So he has PTSD. And you've got to take the time to look at what is that whole picture for this person. Yes, they may have mental health issues, they may have substance abuse issues. Everybody I've ever worked with in 20 years, I have not met one client yet that said, I started drinking to become an alcoholic. I started using drugs to become an addict. Not one. Nobody ever started off with that intention. And I do understand how people try to use the drugs and the alcohol to deal with some of the issues they've been through in their lives. You know, I've been fortunate, didn't have to go through some of those issues. We all think our childhood was rough, right? But some of the folks that I've dealt with, it doesn't hold a candle to anything. My spankings were nothing compared to some of those issues. So this top sheet I put on here is a little bit about mental health first aid, just to kind of give you an overview. It is an 8-hour class that we do. There is an adult version and there's a youth version. So right now in Rockingham County, we've actually been teaching 4 different classes to the school system, because you can imagine that the school system encounters kids with mental health issues. But it's not just the kids, it's the parents. A lot of times you look at what that home environment looks like. I recently did a class for the library, because it's amazing how many people come into the library that are homeless or have mental health or substance use issues. Because guess what? Anybody can walk in the library, right? It's a free place to stay during the day when you have nowhere to go. So looking kind of at mental health first aid, some of the topics that we cover in there are depression and mood disorders. Depression and anxiety are the 2 most common mental health issues we see. How many of you know somebody with depression or anxiety? Yeah. Anxiety alone accounts for about 20% of the mental health issues. So schizophrenia accounts for less than half. People think there's all these folks running around with schizophrenia, and that's not true. More people running around with anxiety and depression. About 8% have depression, so it's not as high as you think. Do you have a question?
I've heard it said that that people get mental illnesses confused sometimes, because schizophrenia is completely different from multiple personality disorder, and people merge the 2 into one disorder. And they call it schizophrenia. Is that true?
That people do get it confused?
No, that they're 2 different things.
Yes, they are 2 different things. So when we look at, just kind of a quick thing, when we look at mental health, we look at a mental health diagnosis, and then we look at what's called personality disorders. So the personality disorders are part of your environment, how you were raised, and it's part of your innate nature that you were born with, right? It's a combination of the 2. So it's very hard to change a personality disorder, because medications don't fix it. It takes some intense therapy to change that. But yeah. Trauma, because so many folks with mental health issues have suffered trauma. Whether it be physical trauma, sexual trauma, I mean, there's all kinds of trauma. And so many folks don't go back and look at that. That's probably the underlying cause of where everything stemmed from. Just like the guy I told you where his brother was murdered, that's when things started with his substance use issues for him. Psychosis. How many of you are familiar with psychosis? A little bit? So what is psychosis? What kind of things happen?
Acute phase of a condition,
Acute phase of a condition?
like schizophrenia's not always psychotic.
Right.
But they have episodes of psychosis where they're really delusional.
So delusions are characteristics of psychosis, right? What else?
So psychosis, like a mental breakdown. It's like, is that what it is? Acute psychosis would be like a small mental breakdown, something like that.
We basically just term it psychosis. So it's characterized with hallucinations, with delusions. Those are a big thing. The hallucinations, people have to remember, and this is real important for you guys when you're doing intake, that hallucinations, a lot of times we think of visual hallucinations, people seeing things that we can't see, or hearing things that we can't hear. But it also can be taste, it can be touch, and it can be smell. So they may tell you, I smell gas because they're trying to poison me. That's part of their paranoia with their psychosis. Or the bugs are crawling on me, that's a biggie that we hear a lot. And so you might be like, what in the world are they talking about? But psychosis is not just for mental illness. Some medications can cause psychosis. some medical issues can cause psychosis. I know I had a kidney stone one time and took some morphine, and I was really I mean, I thought people were standing around my hospital room, but imagine how scary it is. I had a guy withdrawing recently. He had went through detox, and he was having the hallucinations, and he said, I could see this little girl there, and I was worried, that she was gonna get hurt. And I mean, like, people can really, it seemed so real to them, and that was the first time he'd ever experienced that. And he was like, wow. So, it comes, hallucinations can come in all kind of forms, and they can be scary for that person, but it can also be scary for you when you don't know what it is and recognize that that's exactly what's happening. So, a big thing we tell people is that you don't argue with folks that are having hallucinations, right? Because I can sit here and argue all day long with you that no, there's no bugs crawling on your arm, but your thought process is not to that point where you can understand and rationalize that. So the way that we deal with that is we tell people to say, no, I can't see the bugs, but I don't doubt that you do. So that way I'm acknowledging what they are seeing, but at the same time, I'm not lying to them, because I'm a firm believer in being very truthful and honest with folks. I actually had a client today that called, and he said he's working with probation and all these other agencies, and he said, I like you. You're really honest with me. And I said, well, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to tell you straight up, here's the deal. Here's what you need to do. So, and I think clients really can see that, and they value that in you. If you don't know the answer to something, I don't know, but let me go find out, I think they value that much more.
And usually if they're in that state, they can just smell out, they'll say the person who's lying to them and who's not.
Right. Well, and I mean, so many of them have had people in the past who lied to them, and that makes it tough. A lot of the history is tough for people with mental health issues. When you've had a mental health issue or substance use issue 15, 20 years, how many families you think are just like really understanding and, oh yes, let me help you?
Yeah.
I don't get that. Most families I get say, here, take them and do something with them, fix them.
But usually a lot of the families gotten to the point where they don't know how to deal anymore with them and everything, so they're more willing to pass it on.
How many families are taught anything about mental health or substance use issues? Did y'all get that?
Very rare.
Because I missed that class big time. Even in abnormal psych, I didn't really get, that was an 8 o'clock class, I didn't make it to that when I went to Carolina. But I mean, getting in the class like that, it still was totally different than really learning what's happening in the field. So that's what I like with mental health first aid, that we could teach families and friends, communities, how to work with folks with mental health issues.
You mentioned drug addiction. I'm wondering, have you had to deal with prostitution as a co-conspirator with
Oh, yeah.
women?
In Guilford County, I was really big.
Yeah.
How
How do you deal with that?
I mean, I think one of the first things is being non-judgmental, because that's really hard for us, right? But then we have to really work on what are all the issues. Is the issue money that they need? I teach a 40-hour class to law enforcement and paramedics, and other first responders and 911 staff. And we really talk in there about you got to figure out what their true needs are. Get down to the lowest level. Medications, maybe they need their medications, but I don't know how many of you've really looked at the cost of some of the psychiatric meds. They can be pretty expensive. So I tell people, it's like when it comes to paying your rent or paying for your medication, what would you do? If it meant feeding my kids or getting my medications, what do you think a mom's gonna do, right? So it's really tough with those situations, and sometimes you gotta work on controlling the mental health issues and work on that Maslow's hierarchy where we're looking at food, clothing, and housing. Do they have a way to get that? People do desperate things when they need food, clothing, and housing, especially when they've got kids depending on them. So it is really tough. So I make a list of those problems, and we have to tackle them one at a time. And I think we have to accept maybe we're not going to change everything about people. Maybe we're not going to change it all today. We have a method in the mental health world where we could talk about harm reduction. So maybe for people with alcohol issues, maybe we can't get you to stop drinking completely, but we can cut down the number of drinks you have a day. That's what we call harm reduction.
How do you get them from not being proud, you know, and having them ask for the help?
So for some people, it's about just building that relationship with them first. Maybe we just build a relationship together, and I start doing things for you. Maybe it's just taking something. I mean, I've had to start from the ground up with people where it was taking dog treats, you know, to their dog to just get in the door, because not everybody with mental health issues even trust. It's not even always about pride. It's a trust thing. I mean, imagine how many people have broken their trust over the years, right? A lot of these people have been involuntarily committed over the years. So that means somebody handcuffs you and they lock you up and they take you to a hospital. I had a client whose hip was broken during that process because 6 officers tackled him. He was from Bosnia. His English wasn't too good. So he doesn't even trust people. So the pride issue is hard. It's just about building a therapeutic, what we call therapeutic rapport, where they learn to just trust us as a friend. You know, that there's no strings attached with our services. We just come in and we see, maybe you need some food, and we just drop some food off. We might have to do that for a few months.
But they have to make the first step to get to you.
Yeah.
See, I'm dealing with somebody that won't even take that first step to get to you.
And it's different if they're expected to come in here versus you're out in the community. Because some of us, through our faith work, right, we do outreach out into the community. And again, you got to remember, you can't do everything for all people. I mean, and I believe me, that's hard. It's hard for me. I told somebody today, I said, I still have to learn how to say no at times to people. But pride is a hard thing.
I want to talk to you later if I might.
Yeah. Pride is tough too, I think, when you don't have the faith piece, right? It makes it hard too. So, and then the last thing that we teach in that class is we talk about substance use disorders, and really trying to understand that more, because I feel like we just have a lack of understanding when it comes. I know from my background I did before I worked in this field. I sure didn't understand it, and I was very judgmental. Like I said, about people with substance use issues. So here's one big thing that we talk about in there too, that Marty wanted me to stress with you guys. It's an acronym called ALGIE. And ALGIE is a little koala bear that we use in mental health first aid. The A stands for assess for risk of suicide or harm. So the very first thing we have to do off the bat is understand, is somebody a danger to themselves or others? Because number one, you don't want to put yourself in danger. We're taught as paramedics, our safety is number one. Because if I'm not around, I can't help anybody else, right? So assess for risk of suicide or harm to others. And that's a question I find in my faith communities that people are not comfortable asking. Because guess what? If I ask you if you're feeling like hurting yourself, and you say yes, most people say, what am I going to do after that? Right? And that kind of the scary piece with that. So in mental health first aid, we actually role play those situations. We go over, and we'll talk about that, but one of the things we go over is suicidality, and we do a role play with that, because I find that's where people are really the most uncomfortable. Even my paramedics tell me, it's not a question they like to ask, because again, people don't always know what to do, and let me tell you, the mental health system changes all the time. It's changed a lot since I've been in it the past 20 years.
What do you say to someone who says yes?
What do you say? So a big thing we teach in there is about resources. We actually have a toll-free number through Centerpoint that you can call, and I can make sure that everybody has that number if you want that now. Do y'all have a pen? There's a pen right there. All right, it's 888-581